The sun rose slowly over the rolling hills, painting the family land in golden hues. Every morning, Amma quietly walked along the old dirt path that led to the ancestral home. The scent of fertile soil, the rustle of the tall grass, and the distant sound of children playing in the fields always filled her with a strange mix of nostalgia and pride. This land wasn't just soil and trees, it was a living memory of her parents, grandparents, and generations before them. It was her home, her heritage, her family's story written across every acre. Amma's younger brother, Kofi, ran ahead, laughing as he chased a stray goat near the barn. Even after all these years, he had the same mischievous grin that had made their childhood full of joy and small misadventures. Amma smiled at him, feeling a warmth in her chest that came from knowing they had always been close. They were not just siblings, they were each other's companions through the laughter, the tears, and the quiet moments of wonder. Their parents, Nana and Abena, had worked tirelessly to maintain the land. They woke at dawn and slept only after the sun dipped below the horizon. Each field had a story, each tree a memory. The mango tree where Amma learned to climb, the old well where Kofi had nearly fallen one summer, and the small wooden bench under the neem tree where their grandmother used to tell them stories of their ancestors. The land was more than a livelihood, it was their identity. Amma often found herself wandering among the fields alone, her fingers brushing against the leaves, imagining the generations that had walked these paths before her. Every furrowed line in the soil told a story of toil, love, and sacrifice. She loved the land fiercely, knowing that it carried the weight of her family's honor. She felt a quiet responsibility to protect it, to ensure it remained unbroken and untarnished. But not all hearts beat with the same rhythm of respect for the land. Kofi, though he laughed and played with her as a child, had grown restless in recent years. He often spoke of dreams larger than the land, of moving to the city, of making quick money to live a life of comfort and status. Amma noticed it, at first as a whisper of worry, then as a shadow that lingered longer each day. She loved her brother, but she couldn't ignore the hints of ambition that seemed to push him away from the family's values. Their conversations, once filled with laughter, had begun to carry subtle tension. Kofi questioned why they invested so much effort into the land, why they clung to tradition when the world outside seemed to promise more. Amma's heart ached each time they argued, knowing the love between them was real, but so was the widening gap in their values. Still, she tried to understand him. She remembered the nights when they sat by the fire, listening to their parents recount tales of their ancestors. Kofi would roll his eyes sometimes, but he always laughed along, his laughter mingling with hers in those moments of family warmth. She hoped, secretly, that he would never forget the roots that held them together. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, Amma paused near the old well. The wind carried the scent of earth and mango blossoms. For a moment, everything felt perfect, timeless. But deep down, a quiet unease settled in her chest. Something was stirring, a shadow on the horizon that she could not yet name. She glanced at Kofi, who was now leaning against the barn, his eyes fixed on the distant road leading to the city. Amma's heart tightened. She could sense change coming, subtle, inevitable. The land that had always been a source of pride and joy might soon be at the center of a storm she wasn't ready for. But she pushed the thought aside for now, breathing in the familiar air, holding on to the memories, and hoping that love and loyalty could withstand the unknown trials ahead. For now, the family land remained theirs, a symbol of heritage and honor. But the first cracks had begun to show, small and almost invisible, hinting at the turmoil that was quietly gathering strength. The morning air carried an uneasy stillness, as if the land itself sensed the storm about to unfold. Amma walked through the courtyard of their ancestral home, humming a soft tune to steady her nerves. But her peace was shattered when she noticed the officials from the city standing near the barn, papers clutched tightly in their hands. Her heart skipped a beat. She ran toward them, her voice trembling. "What is happening here?" One of the men glanced up with a polite yet firm expression. "Miss Amma, I believe your brother sold this property last week." "The land is no longer yours," Amma froze. The words echoed in her mind, unbearable and surreal. Sold it?" she whispered, disbelief rooting her to the ground. Her eyes darted toward Kofi, who stood by the gate, avoiding her gaze. His lips twitched into a smile that did not reach his eyes. "No, it can't be," Amma said, her voice breaking. "This land, our home, our family's heritage. How could you?" Kofi finally met her eyes, and the truth hit her like a lightning strike. He had done it. He had betrayed the very foundation of their family, all for reasons she couldn't yet understand. Their parents emerged from the house, their faces pale and drawn. Nana's hands trembled as she clutched Abina's arm. "Amma, Kofi, what does this mean?" Kofi shrugged lightly, almost casually. "It means we can finally move on. The city, the opportunities. We don't need to be tied down to this place anymore." Amma felt her world collapse. The land had been more than just property. It had been a symbol of family pride, a living testament to their ancestors' sacrifices. And now, in one cold, calculated decision, her brother had stripped them of it. The neighborhood had already begun to whisper. Children who once played with Amma and Kofi looked on with wide eyes. Adults exchanged quiet comments as they passed. The sale had sent ripples through the community, leaving a trail of judgment and sympathy. "I can't believe Kofi would do such a thing," one neighbor muttered to another. "What shame." Amma's chest tightened with a mix of anger, grief, and disbelief. She wanted to scream, to demand that her brother undo this betrayal, but deep down she knew it wasn't that simple. The papers were signed, the deal finalized. There was nothing she could do, at least nothing for now. Kofi seemed unaware of her pain, absorbed in thoughts of the life he thought awaited him. Amma's gaze fell on the new landowner, a well-dressed man with an air of authority, inspecting the fields as though they belonged to him. He walked past the barn, stepping on the soil that had nourished generations of her family. Amma's hands curled into fists. This man had bought not just the land, but a piece of their history. The family gathered in the living room, a heavy silence hanging between them. Nana's eyes glistened with tears. "We built this land with our hands. With our sweat? How could you betray us, Kofi?" Kofi shifted uncomfortably, but did not apologize. I just wanted a better life," he muttered, almost as if that explained everything. Amma felt a sharp pang of betrayal. The boy she had laughed with as a child, the brother who once promised to protect her, had placed his ambition above family, love, and loyalty. She wanted to cry, to collapse under the weight of heartbreak, but she forced herself to stand tall. She would not let despair consume her. Not yet. In the days that followed, the consequences became clear. The family had to leave the land immediately. Their belongings were packed hastily into a small truck. The walls of their ancestral home emptied of generations of memories. The fields, the barn, the mango trees, they all became symbols of loss. Amma's heart ached with every step she took away from them. Even the neighbors avoided their eyes. Some shook their heads, whispering about Kofi's greed and the family's misfortune. Amma felt the sting of humiliation, as if the judgment of the entire community had descended upon them. At night, she sat alone under the fading stars, struggling to make sense of her brother's choice. Rage and sorrow twisted together inside her. "Why, Kofi? How could you throw away everything we loved, everything we worked for?" she whispered into the dark. Her anger was laced with helplessness. She had tried to understand him, to support his dreams, but this act had broken the trust that had bound them for years. She realized that the path forward would be difficult, that life after this betrayal would test her strength, her patience. and her sense of justice. Yet amid the heartbreak, a small, quiet resolve began to grow inside Amma. She would not let her brother's greed destroy her spirit. She would find a way to protect her family's dignity, even if the land itself was lost for now. The first seeds of determination had taken root, quietly promising that she would face the coming storm with courage, no matter how high the waves rose. And as she watched Kofi laugh at a joke the new landowner made, unaware of the devastation he had caused, Amma's mind whispered one truth she could not ignore. Life has a way of balancing the scales, and sometimes karma does not wait. The days after the sale felt like walking through a storm that refused to end. Amma stared at the empty fields where her family had once toiled with pride. The barn, the mango trees, even the old wooden bench, all belonged to someone else now. The realization sank into her chest like a stone, heavy and unyielding. She had thought that losing the land would hurt her parents the most, but the emptiness weighed on her heart too. Amma tried to hold herself together. She woke early each morning, tidying the small rental house they had managed to find in town, preparing meals, and keeping her younger siblings in school. Every day was a reminder of what had been lost. The land was gone, but so was the sense of security that had always been woven into their lives. Meanwhile, Kofi seemed untouched by the devastation. He flaunted a new life in the city, sleek shoes, tailored shirts, and a carefree laughter that grated against Amma's nerves. He spoke of investments, opportunities, and new friends, as if the loss of their family's heritage were a small inconvenience. Amma's chest ached when she watched him, a mixture of sorrow and anger twisting inside her. How could he forget the soil that had nurtured them, the trees under which they had dreamed so quickly? The community, too, had begun to distance itself. Whispers followed Amma wherever she went. That family, ruined by their own son, people said. Mothers would clutch their children a little tighter, and neighbors who once greeted her warmly now lowered their eyes or walked past without acknowledgement. Social humiliation pressed down on her, but she refused to let it break her. She could not control the whispers, but she could control herself. Each day, Amma worked harder, determined to keep her family's dignity intact. She found odd jobs, helping in markets, tutoring children, running errands, anything that would ensure her siblings were fed and clothed. Nights were the hardest. Lying on the small cot in the corner of their rented room, she thought of the land she would never walk upon again, of Kofi's careless smile, and of the house that had cradled generations of her family. Sleep was often impossible, replaced instead by quiet determination. Yet in small moments, the universe seemed to whisper its subtle justice. Kofi's ventures in the city were not always smooth. A business deal he had celebrated with friends fell apart unexpectedly. His city acquaintances began to reveal their own selfish motives. Invitations he had counted on dissolved into cancellations. Amma watched quietly from afar, a silent observer of the cracks forming in her brother's golden illusion. She did not celebrate. She knew that life had a way of balancing itself, and the scales were beginning to tilt. Amma also found moments of personal growth she had never anticipated. She discovered her own strength, resilience, and resourcefulness. The weight of responsibility pressed upon her, yet she refused to bend. Each day she reminded herself that family was more than land. It was love, loyalty, and integrity. She had lost property, yes, but she would not lose her principles. Sometimes she would catch Kofi watching her from a distance, his expression flickering with something she couldn't name. Regret, pride, perhaps envy. He saw that she carried herself with dignity even in hardship, that her courage and intelligence commanded respect where money and flashy clothes could not. Amma met his gaze without fear, understanding that she no longer needed to plead for recognition. Life was teaching him a lesson, and she would allow the consequences to unfold naturally. Even their parents began to lean on her more. Nana would sit beside Amma, silently watching her work, occasionally placing a hand over hers in quiet approval. Abina would whisper words of encouragement, acknowledging her daughter's courage, while mourning the loss of what had been theirs. Amma carried their pride as much as her own, understanding that the true inheritance of the land was not the soil itself, but the values, love, and determination it had instilled in them. Though life was far from easy, a sense of purpose began to grow within Amma. The land had been stolen, yes, but she refused to let her family's spirit be taken with it. Every effort she made to rebuild their lives was a step toward reclaiming dignity, proving that honor could not be bought or sold, and that integrity outlasted greed. At night, when the small lights of the town flickered against the dark sky, Amma would pause and look toward the distant hills where the ancestral land lay. She whispered promises into the wind, not of revenge, but of survival and justice. The land had been sold, but the story of her family was far from over. Something, she felt, was quietly stirring. The balance of life, of karma, was shifting, and soon the choices made in greed and ambition would reveal their true cost. Amma knew the road ahead would be hard, full of struggle and challenges she could not yet imagine. But she also knew she would face it with courage, her spirit unbroken, her heart steadfast. For now, she had one certainty. While her brother chased fleeting pleasures in the city, she would remain true to the values that had always defined her family. And, in time, the truth would find its way. The city lights glimmered like promises, but for Kofi, they were empty illusions. At first, the thrill of wealth and status had carried him forward. New clothes, new friends, and the praise of those who knew nothing of his betrayal. But the deeper he stepped into his new life, the more fragile it became. Deals fell through unexpectedly. Partners revealed hidden agendas, and the opportunities he had counted on dissolved like smoke in the wind. Amma, far from the city, heard only fragments at first, news from relatives, whispers from acquaintances. Each story added weight to a quiet satisfaction that stirred within her. She did not gloat. She had learned the value of patience and dignity. Yet, as she continued to rebuild her family's life, she could not ignore the unfolding truth. Kofi's choices were catching up with him. The first sign came in the form of a failed investment. Kofi had poured a significant portion of the money from the land sale into a business venture he had boasted about endlessly. Within weeks, his partners accused him of negligence. The project collapsed, and he faced humiliation in front of the very circle of people he had once hoped to impress. For the first time, Kofi's confident smile faltered. Amma watched silently as the stories unfolded, her heart heavy but steady. She thought of the land, the barn, the mango trees, symbols of a family's honor, and of her brother, who had chosen ambition over loyalty. The universe, it seemed, was beginning to correct itself. Karma, subtle but relentless, had started its work. Meanwhile, the new landowner struggled as well. The fields Amma had once cared for so meticulously resisted his control. Crops failed under his hands, animals strayed, and workers quarreled endlessly. The land seemed to resist him, a silent rebellion rooted in generations of devotion and love that no money could erase. And every setback reflected back onto Kofi, who had relied on this man's success for his own prosperity. Amma's family, though still in humble circumstances, found strength in each other. Nights in the small rental house were filled with quiet conversations about endurance and honor. Amma's parents looked to her with pride, acknowledging her wisdom, patience, and courage. "You carry us," Nana whispered one evening, tears glistening in her eyes. "Even when we cannot stand ourselves." Amma remained humble but resolute. She had learned that justice does not always require direct action. It often unfolds on its own for those who have the patience to watch and endure. Each day brought a new story of Kofi's growing troubles. Missed payments, broken friendships, and the slow erosion of the status he had so desperately sought. Yet the most striking moments were the small, personal ones. Amma would hear of neighbors who once admired Kofi's confidence, now shaking their heads at his arrogance. Friends who had celebrated his wealth began to avoid him, wary of betrayal or disappointment. The world that had seemed to promise him admiration now reflected only his impulsiveness and poor choices. Amma herself felt a mix of emotions. There was relief, yes, but also sorrow. Kofi was still her brother. She remembered the boy who had chased goats in the fields, laughed under the mango trees, and whispered dreams of adventure by the old well. Seeing him falter was painful, even if deserved. She grieved for him, as much as she grieved for the land that had been taken from them. As weeks passed, the consequences deepened. Kofi's remaining money began to dwindle. Friendships faded, and he found himself isolated in a city that had once seemed full of promise. Each misstep, each failure, was a lesson he had refused to learn while he chased ambition over family. Meanwhile, Amma's family grew stronger in ways that money could never buy, through resilience, love, and unwavering integrity. One evening, Amma walked past a marketplace and overheard people discussing Kofi's latest misfortune. Their words were not cruel, but factual, tinged with disbelief. The boy who sold his family's land, now struggling to keep his investments afloat, one said. Amma's chest tightened, yet she did not gloat. The sense of balance in the world, the poetic justice of it all, was enough. She thought of the ancestral home, the barn, and the mango trees. The land itself seemed alive in her memory, whispering lessons that her brother had ignored. Life, she realized, was never about shortcuts or greed. Respect, integrity, and patience were far more enduring than fleeting wealth or shallow status. Kofi, meanwhile, began to recognize the weight of his mistakes. The city, once a playground for his ambitions, had become a mirror reflecting his impulsive choices. He tried to recover, reaching out to old friends, attempting new deals, but each effort felt hollow and inadequate. The pride he had carried into the city now became a burden he could not shed. Amma's quiet observation of these events strengthened her own resolve. She no longer feared the future. She had witnessed firsthand the truth she had always known. Actions, good or bad, carry consequences. Greed and betrayal might provide temporary pleasure, but they cannot withstand the tides of justice. And as the sun set over the distant hills, casting long shadows over her memory of the ancestral land, Amma allowed herself a small, private satisfaction, not of revenge but of reassurance. The world, in its own way, had begun to restore balance. Kofi would face the lessons he had avoided, and her family, through patience and courage, would endure. For the first time since the sale, Amma felt a calm certainty. Karma had begun its work. The storm her brother had unleashed upon the family was now turning against him, and she would continue to stand with her parents and siblings, unwavering, resilient, and dignified. The land might be lost for now, but the legacy, the true inheritance of values, love, and integrity, remained untouched. Kofi sat alone in his small apartment, the city lights casting long, cold shadows across the floor. Once, this place had seemed full of promise, a stepping stone to wealth, power, and admiration. Now it felt empty, echoing with the consequences of his choices. Every failed deal, every friend who had turned away, every insult whispered in the marketplace or behind closed doors, weighed heavily on him. He thought of Amma, of the quiet strength she had displayed after the sale of their family land. She had endured heartbreak, humiliation, and hardship, yet she had never faltered. She had rebuilt their lives with dignity and courage, while he chased fleeting pleasures, blinded by ambition. The contrast between them burned in his chest like fire. The realization hit him fully. He had betrayed not just his family, but himself. The land had been more than soil or property. It had been their heritage, their story, their identity, and he had thrown it away for temporary gain, failing to see that true wealth was measured in loyalty, love, and integrity. For the first time, remorse overwhelmed him. He remembered the mornings chasing goats in the fields, the evenings listening to stories under the mango tree, the laughter he had shared with Amma and their parents. Those memories, once light and joyful, now carried the sharp ache of regret. Kofi could no longer hide behind excuses. He had been selfish, impulsive, and blind, and the world had made sure he knew it. Amma, meanwhile, continued to lead her family with quiet resilience. Their small rental house was humble, yet it radiated warmth, laughter, and dignity. Her siblings thrived under her care, and their parents leaned on her strength. The community, once judgmental and skeptical, began to see the difference between the sister who had endured hardship with honor and the brother who had pursued selfish gain. One evening, Kofi returned to their neighborhood, his heart heavy, seeking answers he did not yet know how to face. Amma met him at the doorstep, her expression calm but guarded. There was no anger in her eyes, no scolding tone, only the weight of disappointment and quiet strength. "Kofi," she said softly, "do you understand what you've done?" He nodded, unable to speak. Words failed him, but his eyes carried the weight of his remorse. He had no defense, no excuse that could erase the damage. Amma sighed, a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "You've made your choices," she continued, "and now you must live with them. The land, our family's legacy, it is gone because of your greed, but you can still choose who you want to be from this moment onward." Kofi lowered his head, tears stinging his eyes. He had expected anger, shouting, or punishment, but not this calm, measured compassion. It was a mirror reflecting all he had lost and all he had taken for granted. In the weeks that followed, Kofi began the slow, painful journey of rebuilding, not just his reputation, but his character. He apologized to family, friends, and even former partners, acknowledging the mistakes he had made. Some accepted his apologies, others remained distant. The consequences of his actions were not undone by remorse, yet he learned that integrity was earned, not demanded. Amma continued to guide him, setting boundaries, but also offering guidance. She did not shield him from consequences, nor did she allow herself to be drawn into his pride or regret. Her moral strength became a beacon, showing Kofi what it meant to endure, to rebuild, and to grow from mistakes. The community watched quietly as the story unfolded. They had seen Kofi's downfall, Amma's resilience, and the gradual, painstaking effort he made to mend what had been broken. Respect, they realized, was not given lightly. It was earned through integrity, courage, and humility. And in the end, Amma's family emerged not just intact, but strengthened by the trials they had faced together. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills that still cradled the memory of their ancestral land, Kofi approached Amma. His voice was barely a whisper. I understand now. I've been blind, selfish. I'm sorry for everything." Amma studied him, her heart softened but cautious. "Words are easy," she said gently. "Action is what matters. You will need to prove that your heart has changed. Redemption is not a gift. It is a journey." Kofi nodded, aware of the long road ahead. He had lost more than he had ever imagined, yet he now carried the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to become the man he should have been all along. For Amma, the experience reinforced her belief in justice, patience, and moral strength. She had seen betrayal, witnessed its consequences, and endured the hardships it brought. Yet she had not been defeated. Her family's honor, though tested, remained intact. The lessons of loyalty, resilience, and courage would continue to guide them, even in the absence of the land that had once symbolized their heritage. And for Kofi, the lesson was clear. Wealth, power, and ambition are fleeting. Integrity, humility, and love endure. The choices he had made had brought him to ruin, but they had also given him a chance to rise anew, shaped by experience and tempered by consequence. In the quiet of the evening, as the family gathered to share a simple meal, Amma and Kofi exchanged a look, a mixture of sorrow, understanding, and tentative hope. The past could not be undone, but the future remained a blank canvas, ready to be painted with choices guided by wisdom rather than greed. For both siblings, the story of the land had become more than a tale of betrayal and loss. It had become a lesson in character, in resilience, and in the enduring power of family, morality, and justice. The sun rose slowly over the distant hills, casting a soft golden light over the small town where Amma and her family now lived. Life had returned to a quieter rhythm, filled with simple joys, hard work, and the warmth of togetherness. Though the ancestral land was lost, the spirit of the family remained unbroken, a testament to resilience, courage, and love. Amma often walked through the modest garden behind their new home, her fingers brushing against the flowers and vegetables she had planted. Every plant reminded her of the cycles of life: growth, loss, struggle, and renewal. She thought of the family land, the barn, the mango trees, and all the memories etched into the soil of her childhood. Though she could no longer touch those fields, their essence lived on within her, shaping who she had become. Kofi, too, had changed. The city's lessons had been harsh, but necessary. He had learned that greed could bring only temporary gains, that betrayal leaves scars deeper than any financial loss, and that integrity is not negotiable. He now approached life with humility, taking small steps to rebuild trust with his family and within himself. His path toward redemption was not yet complete, but each day brought him closer to understanding the value of patience, loyalty, and honesty. Amma watched him with quiet reflection. She had endured the storm of betrayal, weathered the trials of loss, and risen with dignity. She understood that forgiveness was not about excusing the wrongs done, but about freeing herself from the burden of anger. Kofi's remorse and willingness to change were the seeds of reconciliation, yet she knew that true redemption would come only through consistent action, not words alone. The family often gathered in the evenings, sharing meals, laughter, and stories. What they had lost in land, they had regained in unity and strength. Their bond had been tested in fire, and it had emerged stronger. Amma saw in her parents' eyes the pride they felt for her courage and wisdom, and in her siblings' laughter she found hope for the future. Sometimes Amma would look toward the hills where the ancestral land lay, a bittersweet ache filling her chest. The memory of the fields, the barn, and the mango trees remained vivid, a reminder of what had been stolen, but also of the lessons learned. Life had shown her that possessions, while meaningful, were not the true measure of wealth. True richness came from character, resilience, and the bonds of family that endure even when everything else is lost. Kofi approached her one evening, hesitant but sincere. "Amma," he said softly, "I don't expect forgiveness for what I've done, but I promise to live differently. I want to honor what we lost and rebuild myself." Amma studied him, her expression thoughtful. She did not rush to answer, for she understood that trust, once broken, could not be restored with words alone. Yet she nodded slightly, acknowledging his sincerity. "Your actions from now on will determine everything," she replied. "Redemption is earned, not given." As night fell, the family sat together, the warm glow of lanterns illuminating their faces. In the quiet moments, Amma reflected on the journey they had endured, the betrayal, the hardship, the small victories, and the lessons learned. Life had tested them, but it had also shown them the enduring power of integrity, courage, and love. Amma realized that the land, though lost, had left an indelible mark, It had taught them about the strength of family, the cost of greed, and the importance of standing firm in the face of injustice. The true legacy of the family was not soil or buildings, but the values and resilience that would guide them through every challenge yet to come. And as she watched Kofi quietly helping their younger siblings with their homework, she understood that while betrayal may bring temporary gains, it could never destroy the spirit of those who hold integrity and patience close to their hearts. Life has a way of balancing itself, she thought, and the choices we make echo far beyond the moment. Ama's heart was calm now. The storm had passed, and though scars remained, so did hope, strength, and the enduring bond of family. The land may have been taken, but its lessons, and the legacy of love, courage, and resilience, would never be lost. The family leaned on one another, facing the future with dignity, strengthened by the trials of the past. In that quiet night, under a sky filled with stars, Amma understood the truth that had guided her all along. Possessions may fade, ambitions may falter, but integrity, patience, and love are eternal.